Hello, lovelies. Right, so I'm just about caught up on everything that I can be caught up on. The Korean adventures are somewhat complete now. I've generated all the NPCs, added the extra material, all of that. Finally did manage to get hold of the artist who's been evading me. Spam folder. So they should be doing one piece for me just to make sure that they're the right fit, which I'll pay them for regardless anyway. And then we'll see if they're the right fit, and if they are, I'll throw more work at them. Another artist I've been working with, who did the cover for Whitechester, was looking for some more work, but his rates are probably too high at the moment. I'm stretched about as thin as I can be monetarily now. I'm at my safety margin, so I'm not especially sure whether it's a good idea to throw more money at him. He's asking for a higher rate than I would normally pay, though I have started paying more because prices haven't really changed since 2002, 2005, which is obviously unsustainable because inflation is a thing. So if I can find a way to squeeze the extra money, I will pay him, but he wants about twice as much, a bit more than I would normally pay out for work in this sphere. Yeah, role-playing industry, it's not where a lot of money is. And yeah, I can get cheaper people, but the quality can suffer, or it can feel like exploitation. I don't really go about as far down that road as I feel I can by employing art students and stuff as much as possible, because I know they'll work cheap, but I also know it'll help them out in terms of their career and money and getting through college and university and all of that. So yeah. So what I'm doing now is going back to working on Whitechester, and alongside working on Whitechester, working on these grim dark rules for 5th edition. So different versions of classes, a lot lower magic level than regular D&D. Some rules changes, more emphasis on skills, that sort of thing, so you can play a more down to earth, almost Warhammer Fantasy roleplay like experience, I guess, or a bit more of an old school feel, but even lower magic. So we'll see whether people react well to that. Whitechester will be at least dual statted, probably, possibly, maybe tri-statted. We'll have to wait and see. And I've been tacking on a little bit of commentary on the end of these updates to make them more interesting. So here's a thought that I've had. See, looking at the way in which people are swallowing information about various forms of snake oil when it comes to coronavirus or the collapse of trust in the mainstream media, a lot of that fault can be laid at the feet of authorities and media authorities and so on, because they have let everybody down to a huge amount. And that trust is not easy to build, and it's not easy to maintain. You get it wrong once or twice, and it takes 10 times as much, good reporting, accurate reporting, honourable reporting to get that trust back. Unless you're pandering to an ideological niche, but then you're no longer in the business of news, right? You're no longer in the business of actually being a reporter, you're in the business of being a propagandist. So I would say, for example, that most of the people working at the Daily Mail are not journalists, they're propagandists. The same can be said for a sizable but smaller proportion of people working at, say, The Guardian, and so on. This has always been a problem, has always been partisan press, but there was also a core and an ideal of telling the news, getting to the facts, exposing dishonesty and all the rest of it. And in recent years, we've lost all of that, right? The trust in the media has collapsed, and in relation to a lot of that, I think we can see why so many things are an absolute fucking mess, right? And like I say, it's hard to get that trust back, but it is also easy for dishonest actors, shills, even more propagandists to exploit that situation of that loss of trust in the mainstream normal media. Yeah, it's possible for that to occur. So if we go back to Gamergate, for example, a lot of people took the latching on to Breitbart and Milo Yiannopoulos as being some sort of aha, we were right moment about accusing Gamergate of being right-wing. But the fact is, a hell of a lot of those people within Gamergate felt betrayed by the regular media, by the games media and so on, who never bothered to look into it, didn't ask them their views for the most part, honourable exceptions accepted. Whereas, at least to start with, Breitbart and Milo Yiannopoulos reported on what was happening accurately, fairly, bothered to talk to people who were involved. And that gave Breitbart a huge amount of credit and leeway and support from people in Gamergate, even if they were very left-wing. And I did, I will ram this point home time and time again, but I did sound the warning about Milo pretty early on. But that's how it happens. That's how there is some ghost of a reality to the idea that Gamergate is a channel to the right wing, or games activism, I suppose, is a channel to the right wing. But it's not, because the people involved are innately right wing, free expression and so on. These are ideas that are associated with liberalism and the left wing. The idea of journalists speaking truth to power, that's a fairly left-wing idea, innately, even before you start getting the activism in there. And so this is what's so weird about it. But the left-wing media, the mainstream media, lost everyone's faith. Whereas the people who reported accurately and fairly gained a lot of faith, and that faith can then in turn be abused. And a lot of these media sources these alternative media sources, spend a hell of a lot of their time denigrating traditional media and talking themselves up. You can't trust these guys, you can only trust me. And that, for some people, that can lead into a spiral and a bubble where they end up becoming anti-vaxxers or ferociously right-wing or whatever else. But the blame is to be laid at the people who initially abused the trust that had been given to them, who failed to live up to basic journalistic standards. But even there, it's not entirely that media's fault. The bottom has dropped out of the monetary model of mainstream ordinary media. And who takes jobs when they don't pay? People who are getting something else out of it. Propagandists, ideologues. Because they get something more than, something other than money out of what they're doing. The kinds of people that you find listed on deepfreeze.it aren't really that different to people who write articles for Stormfront. When you get down to it, there's not any real money in it, but they feel that they're doing important work. That's what they feel, and that's what they get out of it. There's one last aspect to this I've been thinking about. We look at people like, say, Sargon, and we say this person is a funnel to the right wing. Sargon didn't start out tremendously right wing. He started out more sort of libertarian centre left, really. I think having a kid has turned him more conservative. But if we look at these media figures and blame them for funneling people to the far right, I don't think that's the whole picture, because I think they get funneled to the right by their audience, because the audiences that are most enthusiastic and supportive are often those who don't feel that they have a voice in the mainstream media. And while there's a lot of perfectly lovely ordinary people amongst that group that doesn't get a voice in the mainstream media,